And now we've got the book of Micah. So the introduction for the book of Micah is the sixth book of the minor prophets, and it was written by Micah. Well, there's some question about whether it was all written by Micah or not, but particularly in the chapters 4, 5, and some of 7, it was perhaps written at a later date, but it's a pretty safe bet, really, to say that most of it was written by Micah in the 8th century BC. Micah was a contemporary of Isaiah, Amos, Hosea. Those are the great sort of prophets of that era. And his main warnings were all about bringing judgment because of dishonesty and idolatry amongst the leaders of Israel at the time. But he also brought some hope about the future if they lived it right. And he prophesied about Bethlehem being important and about the unending rule of the Messiah that was due to come in the future, which of course we understand that how that all fits in now. And Micah predicted the destruction of both Samaria and Jerusalem for their respective sins. And he really rebuked the people of Samaria for worshipping idols, which were brought with the income that was earned by prostitutes. And, you know, it just wasn't the right thing to do. But Micah was also the first prophet to really predict the downfall of Jerusalem. According to him, the city was doomed because its development and its embellishment of growing and becoming rich was all financed by dishonest business practices, which left the city's people in poverty. And he also called to account the prophets of the day, who he said were getting rich with, if you like, paper prophecies. So Micah anticipated the destruction of the Judean state as a whole, and he promised its restoration that was going to be more glorious than before. He prophesied an era of universal peace over which the governor would rule over Jerusalem, Jesus. And he also declared that when that happened, the glory of Zion and Jacob is going to be restored, and the Lord is going to force all the Gentiles to abandon their idolatry and come and worship the one true God. Micah also rebuked Israel because of its dishonesty in the marketplace and the corruption in government, and he warned the people on behalf of God of the pending destruction that was going to come if they didn't change their ways and their hearts. And he told them really what the Lord requires of them. So an overview really of Micah. It starts with the accusations and the warnings and God appearing over the whole of Israel to bring judgment about his leaders, about their wealth and their greed, but not only the leaders, but the prophets as well that were taking money to try and promise protection. Then the leaders are unjust towards the people with bribery, and they're bending justice to meet their own ends. And it's all against the law, the Torah. And it's he has a big deal with those leaders selling the land of the poor people away from them and comparing that to what happened in Egypt and the exile from there as being something that they really shouldn't do. And that caused the disaster of ruin that's going to come in the future. Then chapters 4 and 5 bring some hope about God shepherding his flock, but shepherding this remnant of people, this small pocket of holy, righteous people that get it right before God. And he says that this ruined Jerusalem isn't going to be permanent, and eventually it's going to be exalted, it's going to be restored with that remnant of people, and God's purpose will be in Jerusalem. It's going to be a meeting place of all nations coming on heaven and on earth, and people are going to stream to it, and heaven's going to come in Jerusalem, and it's just going to be God's awesome thing. He also prophesies that after an Assyrian attack, they're going to get exiled to Babylonia, and it's okay because from Bethlehem, from the line of David, someone is going to come who's going to rule over Jerusalem and the people of God forever. So Micah's got a whole load of that messianic prophecy that all really leads towards Jesus, and it's filled with bunches of those warnings and that hope that's in there. And in the end, God is going to bring a final judgment that's going to rid the earth of all evil. Then in chapter 7, you've got this hope again, this idea of a single person praying for God's mercy in the midst of defeat and asking for forgiveness, and that this balance between God's character that brings forgiveness but also needs mercy, and this reminder of God's promises of the old from Abraham and Jacob that actually, even though you're getting it wrong, all nations are going to be blessed through you, this idea of the remnant. And it's it's Micah's just filled really with this balance between the judgment of God, of wanting things to be right up to the benchmark, and the hope of what is still to come for God's promises to be done. It's what happens in all of these books of this kind of era about the judgment that's there. And God needs righteousness, he needs repentance, and he wants to bring hope through that from the impending destruction that is going to come. So my key verse for tonight from Micah is from Micah 6, verse 8. And it says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." It's all about righteousness. It's all about living it. It's all about doing it. It's all about representing God in those situations and then walking with God whilst doing it. So my so now is all about that verse, really. So when you read Micah, the so now is all about live it right, do it right, chase after the things that are from God, behave right, and just do it. And it's got that key verse has the idea of love, cherish after, the idea of loving kindness, behaving rightly, and then it's that idea of going humbly with God, for all that the future holds. And that is the book of Micah.